How mature our democracy is. It is possible that even in a family, not all children become obedient to the parents. The parents will do their best to teach culture to their children, but some...
From the observer missions that have been deployed here in Zimbabwe, but of course raising quite a number of issues. We know that the delay of the arrival of the ballot papers is one of the major issues, but also the issues pertaining to the transparency. But overall, some positive issues, of course, will have to be around a very calm and a peaceful environment here. Joining us now is the head of the Commonwealth, Ambassador Mohammed. Thank you so much indeed for your time, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. Maybe just take us through to your findings. I mean, you had an opportunity where your members were out and about in Zimbabwe. What did you find on the ground?
Well, we had 14 observers, and most of them actually went out of Harare and were on the ground. They found a peaceful environment, an environment where the polling agents were well coordinated. They were very efficient and professional in the work that they did. Obviously, the delay of some of the ballot papers raised a lot of concern for us, but also for them, because it meant that they had to keep the voters calm and urge them to encourage them to wait for the ballot papers to arrive. Some arrived at about 10 o'clock instead of 7 in the morning. Others arrived at about 11. Some arrived in the afternoon. And I was at a polling station where the ballot papers actually arrived at 7:30 p.m. So obviously, a concern around that because the long wait caused a bit of agitation among the voters. But in general, I think that the people of Zimbabwe need to be commended. They were very peaceful. They waited. They were very patient. They performed, the task that was before them well, whether it was the polling agents or whether it was the party agents that were seated in the polling stations, the security officers that were outside the polling stations. Some were inside, but they were not intrusive. The support that was given to the vulnerable groups, the persons with disabilities, women with young children, lactating mothers, the elderly. So all that, I think all those arrangements went really, really well. I think really the biggest letdown was the delay in the arrival of the ballot papers, and not a credible reason being given for that delay. But all in all, I think we applauded just the peace that existed. A bit of concern in terms of those that were around the polling stations, some of who had no business there. But were there, and that obviously raised eyebrows, including among some of the voters who did not want some people around. I think other than that, the issue of the nomination fees kept coming up. The increase from a very reasonable figure, to a really huge figure, where most of the potential, I think, candidates found quite high and unaffordable. So in general, I think what we could say is that there are issues, there are technical issues that need to be addressed going forward. The people themselves, I think, exemplary. I think all of us can really learn from their patience and their professionalism. ZEC, I think, needs to be much more open, much more transparent, much more inclusive. The flow of information must be continuous so that people know what's happening. But I think other than that, generally, I give a preliminary report of the observers who had really taken a lot of time to just look at all these issues surrounding the polling day and before the polling day. And now we're here and we're waiting for the results to be announced, hopefully within the prescribed time by the law, and then we move forward from there.
And just before I let you go, Ambassador, these are preliminary. It's a preliminary report. Any particular lessons for ZEC? Transparency and all those key issues pertaining to the international practice.
I think transparency is key. I think that just getting everybody on the same page. that always has a calming effect, yeah, on voters, and also gives the impression that you know exactly what is happening, you know what you're doing, you're well prepared, and there will be, hitches here and there. It's always during elections you have a few hitches here and there, and people kind of understand that, as long as you explain it well and give the reasons for it, so that you carry the population with you even as you perform this very, very significant, task for the people of this country. I think that not giving information is, I think, a real letdown, to the people, because they see them there, they expect them to be as professional as everybody else, they expect them to be, as efficient as they promised, at least, and then when this happens, obviously there's a bit of confusion and a bit of agitation, because people don't know. There's that fear of the unknown. If you have information, it's easier to respond. If there's no information, then you're actually in a no man's land. And so I think that more than anything else. But they've done a great job in terms of inclusion, making sure that the vulnerable groups are taken care of, that there's braille ballots for those that have persons with disability, making sure that there was this understanding that they would be given first priority. The training of their agents, I think there they did a really great job, because I don't know how far you went, but those agents were really well prepared and very transparent, and did the counting well, supported the population to facilitate their voting. So in terms of just training their poll agents, I think they did a really tremendous job.
The announcement, they did make it clear that they are rejecting the results. They didn't sign the papers, and clearly this paves way for the judicial process and, of course, and other processes that we don't know. But what is really, really surprising is that Nelson Chamisa, his mom, he did issue a note or a message on social media, on Twitter, encouraging Zimbabweans not to give up. But as we speak, nothing has come out of Chamisa officially. What we saw a few minutes ago, it was the president of Zimbabwe, the outgoing president, now the president-elect in that matter. You remember, after the announcement of the results, he is now president-elect, President Mnangagwa, making a statement where, for me, what was important, that's when he said, no one will be left behind. But how are you going to do it? Are you going to invite the opposition to join your cabinet? How are you going to do it? And secondly, he really raised concerns, criticized the observers who made findings against the Electoral Commission and went as far as questioning some of the laws in that country in terms of the recent amendment or to the laws in that country, where a person can be punished if the government feels that your statements and how you conduct yourself outside the country, it is too much in relation to critiquing the government.
Can I assure you that I did not conduct the elections? I competed with them in this race to win the elections, and I'm happy that I've won the race. I think those who feel the race was not run properly should know where to go to complain. I'm so happy that the race was run peacefully, transparently, and fairly, broad daylight. And I'm happy that there was huge turnout by our people. I'm sure that very few people in this country will say that the elections were marred by any violence, because there was no violence at all. And I think this is what we should, as Zimbabweans, cherish and continue to maintain. This is now shows how mature our democracy is. it is possible that even in a family, not all children become obedient to the parents. The parents will do their best to teach culture to their children, but some kids will continue to do otherwise, but they still remain kids of the family. Yes, I'm aware that some observer missions went beyond their call of duty and began interrogating legislation passed by our parliament. It is my view that every single sovereign country passes their legislation through their legislature, and Zimbabwe is not an exception. And the legislature is composed of the people of this country, and it is through that arm of the state where we regulate what we want as a country. I don't think it is in the mandate of election observers to interrogate institutions of a sovereign government, the judiciary, the legislature, and governance. I believe that their mandate is to observe the transparency, peacefulness, and the fairness of the conduct of elections, which I'm happy to say no one questions that.